Standards Committee, what's that about? Okay, in June 2020, the council put out a press release that they were in solidarity and support of the Black Lives Matter protests. Now, I saw the word protests and I remembered that the weekend before I'd seen BLM protesters throwing bricks at police horses, coppers with blood running down their faces. Basically, they'd been violently attacked by some of these BLM protesters. And I did not want my name as a councillor to be part of support and solidarity with those violent protests. So I put a post on Facebook and it said, we all agree Black Lives Matter, White Lives Matter, Yellow Lives Matter, Animals Lives Matter, Extraterrestrial Lives Matter, All Lives Matter. Yet we see a load of protesters running rampage through the cities, beating up our police and destroying statues and monuments. All lives matter, you dozy pillocks. And I mentioned something about lockdown as well, because it was at the height of lockdown when the pandemic was at its worst and people were dying. And that sort of social gathering was illegal. However, it seemed that they were allowed to do it. So that was the post. Another councillor then took offence because of his left-wing views. Well, that's normally where you leave it. You take offence, you disagree. But he put a post out that said the only way to combat the rubbish he's talking is to report him to the Ombudsman. And he put a link there for the Ombudsman, and underneath it said pile on the pressure. And a group was formed then, quite publicly, because I used to read their posts, where it said Councillor Bainan wants us to report to Councillor Dowson, and they're all getting together so they could formulate their complaints. And yes, that happened. So one of these complaints went to investigation as racism. I didn't really think much of it. You sort of put your faith in these sort of independent, unbiased ombudsman, just like you do in the court system or the police. And 2 years later, funny enough, it took that long, just before the elections, it came back with a recommendation for the Standards Committee. Now, I've got the report, really thick for one Facebook comment. It's just full of inconsistencies. There's a hidden agenda, nobody can deny it. It says numerous complaints about the post were made. No, there wasn't. I was subject to local and national press interest. Not for that. That was for something different, where the same councillor said that I'd said White Lives Matter. Now, to me it's crazy, but I don't know, maybe I'm wrong. Unison and the Labour Party made a complaint saying that All Lives Matter is a Ku Klux Klan statement. I said if they could show me where I said All Lives Matter, I'd resign immediately, because I know I didn't say it, but they continued with it anyway. The Ombudsman says I didn't attend training on diversity. Yes, I did. They provided the training record with Tipex over my signature, blatantly Tipexed over my signature. I didn't attend social media training. It was mandatory. I had no choice. I had to go. I wasn't. Apparently, the crux of the whole complaint is, when I said animals' lives matter, the Ombudsman seems to think that what I was doing was comparing black people to something that we eat, an animal. Now, that's all types of crazy, and it just stinks of bias, really. It's pages and pages and pages. I've highlighted all the inconsistencies. There are actually deliberate untruths. They quote things I said where I didn't say. There's no evidence of me saying it. And it's done very cleverly, a bit like the Western Telegraph, actually, where they'll write something giving the impression that it's a fact when in fact it isn't. They miss out the word allegation and they say, I said. And it's just full of it. It's going to be quite a scandal when it actually does happen. Only because of the fact that I've spent probably hundreds and hundreds of hours going through it, picking up the inconsistencies, just to show the prejudice and the bias. But basically, it all revolves around another councillor who called his followers to arms to bully me. 35 complaints, calling me a racist, which caught on because I would not support the violent protests. The leader of the council is a witness. However, he's the author of that statement, so I don't know how he could be a witness. The former chief exec, who should not be involved in political discussion, he's a witness. And the monitoring officer, who I've never met, and she wasn't in post at the time. So there we are, that's how it's run. I can't believe it's gone to committee, actually. They should have read that and just thought we could do without the scandal. But they want that scandal, and it's there plain. I deal with facts, I don't deal with conjecture or assumptions. It's fact. How many complaints have there been about me? I submitted a subject access request just a couple of weeks ago, and it's 35, made by 20-something people, so some have had a crack at it a few times. There's Marcel, who stalks me actually, is a bit obsessive. He is a witness in most of those 35, and he's also made a handful of complaints himself. And it's always, I believe, Councillor Dowson's a racist. And I don't know how far they think that kind of complaint's going to go, but there's a few more that are just as full of prejudice as that one. Why am I attending an adjudication panel hearing? That's the next level up on seriousness. There's 3 separate complaints, all a couple of years old again. The first one is where I outed a councillor for some of his more dubious behaviour involving videos of a schoolgirl. And I also found on the public TikTok platform, primarily used by teenagers, sexually orientated videos the same councillor had made. A paediatrician from the local health board actually got in touch with me because he had safeguarding concerns, and he is the lead safeguarding doctor for the health board, and we made the necessary complaints for safeguarding. However, it went to the Ombudsman, it went to the police twice, and the Ombudsman interviewed this councillor. He lied through his teeth about it. He went on BBC News and said it wasn't him. In fact, it was. And when the Ombudsman discovered it was a lie, they kind of forgot about it and gave him another chance to complain. This also involves Mr. Laval, who appears in everything, and another chap who was a serial bully, stalker, obsessively with me, who took on another person's identity with the same name as him. And this person had been to prison, so he pretended to be him. So I mentioned he'd been to prison. That's what that complaint's about. I said the wrong person had been to prison. Technically it was, but he was pretending to be the wrong person. RSE sex education is coming in. Wales were the last country to sign up to it. Completely inappropriate, age inappropriate as well. And the UNESCO guidelines and framework for this curriculum actually recommend that children from 3 to 6 are taught about masturbation, good touch, bad touch. It's there in black and white. I've got it, I've submitted it. Now the Ombudsman seems to think that it's misinformation. I said it was part of a UNESCO global rollout. Scotland have done it, Ireland have done it, England have done it. They've learned by their mistakes. You go on the internet, I could find 100 links, which I did do, sent them to the Ombudsman to prove it. I had a letter from the Education Minister, Kirsty Williams at the time, from the Welsh Assembly, and in there she actually says it is in conjunction with UNESCO framework. So I sent that to the Ombudsman. The report comes back and says I showed no evidence of a link between the RSE curriculum and UNESCO, even though the Education Minister had actually written it. On one of my posts I put 0 to 3 rather than 3 to 6, some typing error. The Ombudsman seemed to think that was a deliberate mistake. I did it on purpose, therefore it's misinformation. And so that's going there for, well, I don't even know what breach the code is. And the final one, now get this is absolutely cracking. A person using a fake profile, which most abusers and bullies do, they don't use their real names, attacked me on social media, said I should abstain from breathing, I was a Nazi, a bigot, accused me of doing a Nazi salute, and so on and so forth. Now I said that I'd heard he was on the Antifa register in part of the conversation, and he complained saying I meant the sex offenders register. Well, even if I did, it doesn't matter. This person doesn't exist. He's not alive. It's a fake profile. Timothy St. John. The guy who complained, his name is not Timothy St. John. It's Timothy. And he actually admitted that the profile was made to hide his identity because of his work in mental health. Now, coppers don't do that. They don't hide it, and they're a little bit more vulnerable than mental health workers. This profile had been used millions of times to abuse me. That's why it existed. It was his abusing profile. Now, the Ombudsman took a complaint from a person with an entirely different name, with absolutely no links to that profile whatsoever, treated him as the same person, and said that I tried to defame him, ruin his reputation and credibility, and I did it on purpose. Well, he was the only person that knew that those two profiles were linked. So, therefore, I'm breaching the code of conduct by abusing someone who isn't even alive. So, you know, just the fact he's using the fake profile is devious enough. And there's lots of other things involved in that as well that just beg. What can I tell you about it being prejudiced? These files, as thick as they are, there's hardly a paragraph in there that hasn't been twisted, turned, or is a blatant lie. I spent probably 700-800 hours putting together defence against it, because it was a defence against it all. And all those efforts were in vain because everything I sent was completely ignored. Not even referenced, you know. There were things I submitted that just did away with what they were accusing, however they were ignored. I'm more than happy to show anyone these reports, even though it's a breach of the code of conduct if I do, because this one here, the Ombudsman actually lost in the post. They sent it first class, and it never reached me. But it did turn up. It turned up in the local papers, so it reached somebody. Now, by releasing that, if it was me, it would be prejudice and a hearing by letting it out in the public domain. However, the fact the Ombudsman let it out in the public domain doesn't count. It can't prejudice if it's them that do it. So, you know, the person who actually received it doesn't know where it came from. But because it came from the Ombudsman, therefore it can't possibly prejudice anything. I have highlighted throughout these, it's just full of it, of issues that I've found where they've lied, deliberately said a false statement, or just twisted everything around and ignored what I'd given them. And there's a lot of time and effort went into there. Half these complaints I don't even take any notice of, because I know exactly what's going to happen. Now, the Ombudsman is not fit for purpose. I've accused them of prejudice, I've accused them of bias. I'll go ahead and do that again at the hearings, and I will do it publicly, because I have evidence. I don't mess about. When I look for something, I get the evidence. There's indisputable fact there that it's prejudice, and this is going to be big. Watch this space. Abuse and bullying, who and how. There's only a handful. I don't mind naming them because they do it blatantly anyway. There's Marcel Laval, who is an obsessive stalker, actually. Not a day goes by without him posting something to do with me. He's absolutely obsessed. And it all stems back, we were really good friends once, and he actually made a sexual pass at me. And I wasn't interested, and ever since then, he has had it in for a sort of revenge type thing. He runs a couple of pages that he uses specifically to abuse me, and I have 6,000 separate bits of evidence, comments from him and the 5 or 6 other people that do it. Just abusive, bullying comments. They've done everything they can to try and ruin my life, and they're still at it now, even at election time, and it's illegal. It's the Pembroke Dock Citizens Forum, although it passes itself off as a legitimate sort of local people's forum. They won't have anybody who doesn't agree with their political views. They ban them. They sneak little posts to me. One of the headline posts is the adjudication panel sort of date, calendar, because that's it. So people will look at it and they'll believe them because nobody's there to defend it. There's Hayley Wood, she's one of the admins. Elaine Wyatt, she's put the RSE complaint in about me. Adam Vincent, I've had a death threat from him. Jennifer Fox, she made a complaint. Ombudsman didn't uphold it because most of it was lies. But now she's going round on social media saying I sexually abuse children, which is quite illegal. Adam Vincent's doing the same, and it is absolutely relentless. So, just to summarise, for the last 2 years there's been a campaign, a relentless campaign of abuse and bullying. They've tried to discredit, defame, they've even tried to get me prosecuted, staging drug raids and whatever. And you know, it does get you eventually, and it involves more than just me. You know, it spreads. It is just a handful, however, this handful multiplies because the forums that they operate, these people, Marcel and what Bainan used to do, there was a captive audience. There'd be 3,500 people in there. Anyone that dissented would be banned. There'd be nobody there that would sort of put them right because they'd be banned. And the lengths they go to, their lives must be absolutely sad because they must spend hours every day doing cartoons. There's some cracking cartoons of me. They're all meant to be abusive, but some of them are quite funny. There's Pembrokeshire Musings. There's been Antifa West Wales, a page called Sack Councillor Dowson. Dowson the Racist, that's on YouTube as well. Woke of the Iron Snowflake is dedicated to abuse. No More Hate Wales. They actually contacted somebody I work for, and they contacted them last week because I provide security with these people, and told them I was a racist. They do this to people. They've had people lose their jobs, and it's all left-wing pressure. I think that's what the Ombudsman's caved into. These left-wing extremists and such. There's nothing wrong with being left-wing. You've got your views, keep your views, whatever. But these are extremists. It's like terrorism. You know, they actually make it a mission to ruin people, and they have done. And they're doing it now. The election time's coming. All right, they're doing it to me, but they're also doing it to some newbies. I don't know what it is they hope to achieve, but this is what goes on. People don't see it. I put a post on Facebook earlier, and I just had random people who I've never met in my life telling me I'd never vote for you, and you're a racist, and you're far right. And this is just what they've heard. So you know, I've challenged them now to do a live video feed with me, one-to-one, debate it, give me the evidence, and you know, make me look a fool. But none of them will. They all shy away from it. They're all afraid, especially the Val. I just won't do it because it's all lies. And when you know, if they're confronted with a live one-to-one feed, they can't hide behind the keyboard anymore. And I just think it's a sorry state for the world to get into when these sort of people actually, you know, dictate what goes on everywhere. But we will defeat them.